was about 11 when this happened. My older cousin Daniel, about 13, and I were playing hide and seek outside in my grandmother's yard. She owned a large farm in Tennessee, just over 1,000 acres, and I grew up there my entire life, and so did Daniel. So it was nothing for us to wander off and play in areas that probably weren't that safe for the average kid, but we knew the property like the back of our hand. It just so happened that the day before this happened, a lot of trees were cut down to make room for a new mobile home by the side of the road that she intended to rent out for extra income. Daniel and I naturally gravitated toward this new unfamiliar landscape to play because it was something new to explore. All of the trees had been stripped of their branches and placed in logging trucks and hauled off. The branches, however, were all piled in a tangled mess about 50 feet wide and 12 to 15 feet tall. They were packed so densely that you couldn't see through them from one side to the other. It was during the half-hour mark when it was my turn to find Daniel that I began to suspect that he was hiding in the woods deeper than our stated rules allowed. I remember calling his name for several minutes and hearing nothing but a quiet giggle coming from the woods. I was in a newly cut clearing, looking into the woods and getting more upset by the minute. Finally, I announced as loudly as I could that if he wasn't going to play fairly, then I was going to go inside and get a glass of tea and watch television with Grandma. I started back up the hill, towards the house. It was at that moment I was walking past the brush pile, basically centered beside it, that I heard an unfamiliar voice say, "You gave up very quickly." I stopped. I called out, "Daniel?" It didn't sound like Daniel, but the voice responded, "Yes, I'm Daniel. I'm inside the limbs." I looked at the brush pile and didn't see anyone. Again, I heard the odd voice call out, "If you do not see me, then you have not found me, and I will have won the game." I stepped closer and yelled out to the voice, "Why are you talking so funny?" The voice replied, "I am inside of the limbs. Look inside and you will find me, Daniel." Something felt very strange about the way this guy was talking, but 11-year-old me just rationalized it by thinking, maybe his voice sounds different behind the shrubbery, and he sounds like he's talking funny because his voice sounds different. I stepped up to the edge of the brush pile and pulled the branches apart to look inside, and there was Daniel. His head was turned toward the top of the hill, but his body was facing me. I yelled out, "I caught you." His head shifted toward me, and he had the single most disgusting smile I've ever seen to this very day. Imagine if someone had the absolute worst intentions and they're trying to hide behind a fake innocent smile to gain your trust, but they couldn't help their glee with the thought that they may have fooled you. And that's the best way I can describe that smile. I was so shocked by this wicked facial expression on my cousin's face that I froze in place, the hairs on my neck and arms all raised, and I could suddenly feel my blood running through my body like the temperature had dropped inside my veins. I stammered through my words, How did you get in there?" "I fell into the inside of the limbs, cousin. I will need you to give me help or I will continue to be trapped." I didn't notice this at the time, but how oddly he phrased his sentences, and it only occurred to me afterward that he never changed his face from the twisted, unnerving smile. I didn't immediately notice any of these things because I was too distracted by the large stick that was plunged deeply into the side of his neck. I noticed in that moment that he had a slow, steady, trickling stream of blood flowing from the $half-dollar-sized stick in his neck and down across his right shoulder and chest. That was enough to jolt my feet awake, and before my brain realized I was already running and half up the hill to my grandmother's house. When I burst through the door to my grandmother's living room, Daniel was curled up in a ball on the couch and crying hysterically. My grandmother was sitting beside him, trying her best to get him to explain what was wrong, but all he would say was that there was a little boy in the woods who tagged him when he was hiding, and he thought it wasn't really me. He wouldn't say anything else about it. I was crying and shaken up at this point and told my grandmother what I had seen. She made both of us some lunch and then called my uncle to come pick Daniel up. I stayed at my grandmother's house that night, and I bet she asked me what happened 100 times. She asked so many questions, it was as if she were committing it to memory. I remember being relieved that she believed me, but at the same time, I just wanted her to tell me it was all my imagination and help me forget about it. The next day, my grandmother set the brush pile on fire, and I watched for hours from the safety of the living room window as it slowly deteriorated into a pile of ash and ember. My cousin never did tell me what really happened to him that day. He refuses to talk about it. I will say this though, He wouldn't talk to me for a year and a half after that day. We were so close when we were little, but that event, whatever the hell it was, drove a wedge between us and changed our relationship forever. When I was 14, I walked into our dining room. My little sister, who was 8 at the time, was standing partially concealed by the curtains. I spoke to her and she turned. It wasn't my sister. The girl was standing with the black cat and smiled at me as if she were waiting for me to say something. Then she just disappeared. I ran to my mom, scared shitless, and told her. Fast forward about 15 years and I'm married with 2 daughters, 8 and 2. I walk into the living room and see my oldest standing partially concealed behind the drapes. I speak to her and she turns. She smiles expectantly as she strokes Shadow, our black cat. She obviously didn't disappear, but she was the same girl I saw at 14 in my childhood home. This story happened about 11 years ago to me. It's important to note that it happened in mid-December. I'm from Iowa, and the winters here get cold at night. Like, if you get stuck outside of the house, you will kinda die cold. That, plus the snowfall, makes everything dead silent. You can hear anything and everything inside the house and even immediately outside of it. Well, me and my best friend were hanging out in my family's walkout basement, just having a boring winter night, playing video games. We were also the only ones home. The reason it was just us was because my mother went from work straight to a bar to grab a few drinks with coworkers. So me and my friend thought it would be a good idea to break into the family wine and live a little. As we were sitting there opening up the first bottle, I hear the door to the garage door open and slam shut. I immediately go, oh shit, and start looking for places to hide the bottle. My friend then says, I thought you said your mom was supposed to be out all night. She was, I replied. I then heard a few heavy stomps, and my mother yell out, anyone home? I yell back up the stairs saying yes, just hanging out in the basement. I hear a few more footsteps moving from the garage door towards the stairs, and she yells out again, can you come help me with something? I need your help up here. I reply back while frantically trying to find a good place to hide the wine bottle. Yeah, just give me a minute. Then there was silence for about 20 seconds. Anyone down there with you? She yelled back in a more concerned, serious tone, in a voice that was slightly off from my mother's. This was the first thing that told me something wasn't really right. Our family never really cared if anyone was over, as our house was a very open house to all my family and friends. And the voice, it was just wrong. Like it sounded like my mother's, but it was missing something that I couldn't put my finger on. Weirded out, I reply back, it's just Colton. After I yelled that back to her, I found a good place to hide the bottle, and now, as I'm walking up the stairs, I couldn't help but feel the overbearing silence of the house and the slight electric twinge that something wasn't right. When I got to the top of the steps, I look over to where the door to the garage is, and also the kitchen right next to it, and it's black, pitch black. All of the lights were off, and there was no moonlight shining through any of the windows. I walked over to the kitchen and yelled out, Mom, where are you? There was no reply, just silence and darkness. I feel the electric twinge turn into full needles and my adrenaline kicking in full force. I have to get out of here as fast as possible. My mother wasn't home. I run back down the stairs, grabbing my coat along the way. What's wrong? Colton says. My mom, she's not home. I reply as fast as I can, looking for my truck keys. What do you mean? You were just talking with her? I could see the confusion in his face. There's no one home, we need to leave now. I took a few steps towards the back door that opens up to the yard, and then I see my dog shaking on the couch and my cat growling behind it. I couldn't leave them. I just knew that if we left, something would happen. Are we leaving? Colton said, still confused as hell. No, I can't leave them here alone. Something is really off. I'm just gonna call my mom and figure this out. I pull out my phone and call my mom. She picks up immediately. What's going on? She answers. Mom, were you just home? I heard you yelling from the second level, and when I went up, you weren't there. I said frantically, hoping that she was playing a joke. No, I'm just leaving the bar. I I wasn't feeling very well. Are you okay? What do you mean you heard me? I fill her in on the whole story, and she rushes home. Colin and I stay in the basement with the animals until she got home. But before she did, you could hear something up the stairs. Not walking or sitting on things, but a pressure in the air, like a black hole was slowly moving from one room to the next, and the word I would instinctively describe it as is hungry. When she got home, you could feel the thing just leave as quick as it came, like an overbearing, predatory presence had just flown away. We still never figured out what the hell was going on that night.